Age is an issue of mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Mark Twain. Welcome to the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to have the confidence, because you're doing the work, to really lean in and rock it. All right, today is the last in the Retirement Plan Live series with Laura and Nick. Haven't they been awesome? What a blessing to have Laura and Nick and everybody else that raised their hand to make this series possible. Thank you so much. And today we're going to talk about their perception of investment risk and aging as a solo, as someone who's never married and doesn't have children or as much of a support network. And then on January 30th, we're going to talk with Laura live in a live event where we're going to go through her vision, whether it's feasible and how to make it resilient. And then Monday, February 3rd, we're going to do a live event at 7 p.m. Central, both of them, with Nick and do the exact same thing. And if that wasn't enough, on Thursday, January 30th, we open enrollment for the Rock Retirement Club. I invite you to join the club and get access to all of the tools you need to build your retirement plan of record, as well as have the support from experts in the field and a cohort of over 1,000 pre and post retirees, all with no hustle or sales pitch once you're in the club. It's a safe place to focus on retirement planning. We'll have an open house on February 4th, and you can learn all about that at livewithroger.com. All right, with that said, let's get down to the work and talk about risk and aging. We are back with Laura. How are you doing, Laura?
Really good. How are you?
I am great. I'm great. It's January. I think by the time this comes out, because it's doing it before, I am 58 now.
Ooh.
So I have about a month where my wife is 2 years older than me. And so now she's only 1 year older than me again. So I can't tease her till next year. It's been great doing this with you, by the way.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of this because I'm realizing the more I learn, the more like you had mentioned peeling an onion, the last time we spoke, you're peeling back layers and layers and layers, and it doesn't seem to end. And there are some people who get all into it and they're looking at their computers every day and they're trying to figure things out and they're maximizing and minimizing and, doing all these things to make their plan work. And although I want to be aware and make sure I do the best plan, I don't want to spend my retirement just managing my finances. So thank you very much for your help.
You hit on a direction that a lot of things are going. I've had a lot of time over the holidays to really reflect on the next step forward. And you hit on a lot of those in my practice, we're very detail oriented, and working with clients, but also in the club and definitely on the show, this should not be a new job.
Right.
This is a means to an end. Right. And just like you have to visit a doctor and go through a protocol in a certain rhythm, you should do that with your retirement plan. But beyond that, maybe you're working on something the doctor said to work on. It doesn't become your life.
Yes.
For those that make it their life, usually it's because they just love geeking out. Or I think another thing, and there could be a combination of this, Laura, I think, is it gives them the sense of control.
Yes.
Right. I do that too with updating my net worth. Like, oh, where's it at? But it makes me feel like I'm in control and I know what's going on. You said something last week that I have been noodling on, and that is, I think it was related to taxes. Well, how do you figure this out? I think it was exactly the inflection that you said it. And last year we did an episode, and we'll put a link to it in Six Shot Saturday. That is a great question. And the answer is you can't, which is so hard to get over, right? And we had a show where we talked about the difference between a complicated problem. What you do in transportation is a complicated problem. How do I get this from point A to point B You can map out the routes, you can map out the vehicle and the fuel and everything else, and you can actually create an algorithm and a plan to achieve it, right? That's a complicated problem. It's solvable with, things happening periodically. A complex problem is one that is so fluid where the inputs are changing constantly in a multidimensional way and preferences are changing constantly that it can't be solved. It can only be managed.
Okay.
That may sound esoteric, but it's so critical. Because if you think you can solve a complex problem, you're going to drive yourself nuts. And the more we can own that, right? Anyway, now we're going to talk about a lot of things we can't solve. You ready?
Okay, I am.
So we're talking a little bit more under the third pillar of resilience and getting a sense of where you're at as a person. We're going to have you take the RISA, which is Income Style Awareness Personality Test, which is going to help tease out how you think about providing for your life. And, on the two extremes, there's something called systematic withdrawal. I just have all my money and I invest it and I take out a percentage each year, to the other extreme, which is safety first, which is I just buy a bunch of guaranteed income and I never think about it again.
Okay.
So we're going to have you take that test and we'll take a look at that when we meet on the 30th live, which will be fun. It's a good, just like any personality test, you get a feel for, we want to make sure the style in what you provide for your life matches not just the numbers, but what you're comfortable with so you can have confidence. But before you take that test, let's just talk about it in an abstract way. How do you feel about markets and risk and investing? What's your experience there?
I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience. I mean, I understand it. I pay attention to it. I know, politically with different political climates, people think that, it's better this way or that way. But bottom line, when you look at the market tends to always eventually go up. I do understand that. I know there are times where the market does go down, and we've had some years that have been terrible. But ultimately, everyone in charge, I think, has the same goal to have the market go up. But I mean, I understand it from, a basic standpoint and what we have to look at and how it varies and things.
How did you survive 2008 when all those, those 3 or 4 401ks that you had scattered about went down by a good percentage?
I mean, there was nothing to survive because I just left it there, and eventually the market corrected and the money was back in there and has grown since. I do know some people who changed their, did the drastic change and pulled it out of the market and went to, bonds or, changed the percentage. And I think I'm faring better than they are at this point. But I do know that obviously, you make different decisions depending on where you're at in life. But I just figured in time it would correct itself, I hope.
Well, and during that time, I'm guessing you saw them go down. Do you recall, did they go down by half or a third?
I think there was like a third, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you take your 1.3 million 401k or retirement accounts right now. What is the third of that? I'm doing some quick math. That's it went down by $433,000.
Yeah, that's a good thing they're all separated, and I didn't quite see that number.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but yeah. Plus, you were working and contributing.
Correct.
And you were busy because you were working and doing your health and your dogs and all that. Do you think that needs to change when you retire? I mean, you've had great experiences, but what's your plan for when you retire?
My thought was part of it, leave it in a little more of a risky or stock situation. And then the other part, maybe move some of it, especially within the next 5 years of spending, in something that is a little more stable and a little more secure.
Okay. And what's the logic behind that thought?
I don't want to be homeless. No. Just, security, making sure that I am not, that there's resilience, as you would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you thought about that. Okay, and I agree with that conceptually. You want to get a little less, a little bit less aggressive. If you're in retirement and you make this adjustment to more moderate allocation, and all your aggressive stuff starts to go down. Let's say we go through another 2008. Have you thought through how do you know when you should worry and when you shouldn't?
I have not
Okay.
necessarily thought through that. I think that if it was, let's say now, then I mean, I guess if you're saying at what point, like if I've lost 50%, yes, I definitely would be worried. Yes. But being that I was still working, I didn't worry as much.
Which makes sense because you're living off of your income.
Right.
It is hard. Like even like in '08, if you were 100% in stocks went down 50%, but they came back and made tons of money. And knowing that they come back, it's, you're sort of stuck. It's like, should I worry or just wait? Should I worry or just wait? You sort of grapple with that. Okay. We'll have you take the RISA, and we're going to work through this on the 30th.
Okay.
To put some framing around it so you have more of a protocol to know when to worry and when not to.
Okay.
So just building that, I think, is helpful. Now, you have some wrinkles to your retirement because you were single with no children and not a lot of family network that's going to be there when you're 60, 70, 80, your mom's age, 87, right? 87?
Yes, he's 87. Yes. I do have a lot of nieces and nephews, but my plan is not to burden them with that.
So housing, let's start there. And I'm just going to bring up some topics and just get your impression. So, and you have a good reference of your mom.
Yes,
right?
I do.
So let's use her as your future self. Okay. And you knew her when she was 80 and 75. So think of her in those different stages. From a housing perspective, what is ideal for you in your mind?
Are you talking about like...
Are you going to stay in your house forever?
I would. I mean, what is forever? I would say that I would stay in my house until my mid-70s at least.
Okay. When you're not able to, because you're wearing out your body doing all this fun stuff, running, cycling, who's gonna get up on the ladder and clean out the gutters or change the light bulbs and things like that?
I think at that point I would definitely have to hire someone to do that, and that is a cost that I hadn't quite considered.
Okay.
But at that point, I probably wouldn't be traveling as much, maybe, or...
so they would sort of equal out.
Maybe they would, yeah.
Okay. And this is definitely a lot of over-the-horizon questions, right? We can't see.
Right.
And my mother-in-law is 82, and she does not have dementia. But her trying to talk to the insurance rep for auto or healthcare insurance, talk and navigate getting healthcare payments or doctors. It's not great. It's not pretty.
No.
So when you're 81 or 2, have you given any thought as to, well, who's going to help me even just manage my healthcare?
I think that's a huge market that people need to start tapping into, really, to offer services like that. Because I do see it with my mom. I mean, yesterday she got a call. I don't know why they called her, and she canceled her doctor's appointment for this week. Why are they calling her? I don't know, but she gets confused. And yes, you do need someone that kind of has your back a little bit. And no, I mean, I have got to meet younger people, I guess, right? Make friends that are younger than you. But I don't have a plan, but I definitely see a need in the market out there for,
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to have a plan, so don't feel.
Yeah. Yes. It is a kind of a crazy thing. Like, I do see everything my mom's going through. I mean, even this, trying to figure out your retirement, as you get older, you want less complication, not more. And then at 65, you have to figure out, Medicare and part A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that's what it seems like all these different layers of stuff that really is complicated. And as your mind becomes a little less complex or able to handle some of those things, I can see how people get overwhelmed.
And not having a partner or a child to help, like, my wife is, the advocate for her mom, makes it hard to get on the phone with them, right? And deal with them. So I agree that this is a gap in services to have those people in place. And I do think that the market already is starting to address that. And I think that will be a growing industry of some sort. What form it takes, I don't know. And we're internally looking to find, okay, because we have a lot of single people that we work with and a lot of single people in the club. Where do you do this? So it's got to be somebody that can do this, right?
Right.
Same thing with home help, navigating health insurance. What about socially? I mean, you're very active, you're very connected. As we age, the current sort of pulls us to isolation if we don't battle that.
Yes, I see that tremendously with my mother. We have the senior center that she goes to, which I think is great. She pushes back on going, which I find interesting, but it's something that is an awesome service out there where people get together, they have lunch, they dance, they play cards, they play bingo. So I do know there's services out there that are pretty awesome. She was going on a regular basis back when she could drive in her mid-70s, and then COVID hit. And that's where I really saw, especially for the elderly, how bad socially that was for people too, because she lost all those connections.
Yeah. COVID from a health perspective, but from a social perspective, it hit some people extremely
really hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think her pushback is to going to the senior center?
I think sometimes it's just a comfort at home. She's got to get up. She's, got to get dressed and go. I think it's more the creature comforts that we have. And sometimes changing your routine is hard. And as you get older, people get a little more set in their ways. So I think that is the pushback with her.
Okay.
Specifically. Yeah.
I think a lot of this area, Laura, is whether it's isolation, emotional and mental support. Every study looks at your social network, your social capital in the human aspect is critical to happiness and connection, emotional, mental health. And we got to be really proactive about it. So I think it's just something to be aware of. Okay.
Yes. And no, I mean, I think it's great you bring it up. It's something that I have been more aware of just even now, because let's say when I was in college, you just had plenty of people to talk to, and even at work, but sometimes when you're at the top of the ladder, if you will, you can't just have those casual conversations. So I've been much more active in pursuing like the meetup groups. I think I mentioned before, we have so much out there with technology that makes it so much easier. If I want to go on a hike, I can just do a meetup hike, a bike ride, I can do a meetup bike ride. It makes it so much easier to make connections if you make the effort.
One area that you're going to have more evolved skills than most is that you are comfortable living alone and you're comfortable navigating socially as a single person.
Yes.
One thing I've observed, my mother-in-law to an extent, but definitely some clients, male and female, is the married forever people that lose a spouse, especially later in life, and they are so lonely because they've never developed those skills.
Yeah, it's got to be really hard, really, really hard. I mean, I see it in a way with my mom, just the simple things that, well, your dad used to do these things. And I'm like, okay, well, here, let me take care of it. But how did you not learn? But that's true. And I've heard it with, some of your podcasts where it's one person being the primary and the other person either doesn't want to get involved or doesn't, it just doesn't interest them. And it's like, well, there's no guarantee that both of you are going to leave this earth on the same day.
Oh, there's almost a guarantee that you won't.
That
right?
You won't, yes.
Yeah.
Although there is a lovely story of a couple that they were both poets that actually did that together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the only story I've ever heard. But yeah, we come into this world together, we leave this world, or I'm sorry, alone, and we leave this world alone. And I don't think people, especially if they've been in long-term relationships, are prepared for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And outside of all the logistical stuff you name, I think it's literally just being alone is not something that has been practiced if you've been in a long-term relationship. You never even think about it. Right. So you have some more evolved skills that are to your benefit in that.
Yes.
It's good to really like yourself and be comfortable with yourself.
And my dogs.
And your dogs. Yeah, I don't know.
Dogs, yes.
We say that we're going to be dog free when Sherlock passes because we want to be able to travel a little bit more. I don't know if we're going to be able to handle that.
Yes, it's a tough one. Yeah. I've thought of that too, because I do want to travel, but then it's like, but what about my day to day? I need, my dogs motivate me. I get out every day. I mean, I went on a 4-mile walk with them today, and they're wonderful companions. And they don't talk back.
Well, I don't know about that. Sherlock, the last 2 days walking him, because he's such a chill dog. He's a big Great Dane, and he's been like, I'm going this way. He's been much more ornery about that than he usually is. All right. So on the 30th, what we're going to do is we're going to hang out. We'll have some people hanging out with us that we won't see.
Okay.
They'll be able to type in questions that we'll moderate. But you and I are going to walk through, review the vision, what Laura wants, look at the feasibility of that vision, and then navigate that a little bit of how you can test different scenarios, and then look at how resilient it is and start to frame in the resilience of it, and even talk about, well, how might you allocate it to make it more resilient so you can have a framework to know when you should worry or moderate or change.
Okay.
And then you can just ask questions to your heart's desire of, what about this? I don't understand that. Where are taxes and all that other stuff? Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, makes sense.
Okay.
Very excited.
I am too. I love this journey for you. All right. Well, I'll see you on the 30th.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see you. Talk again.
All right, Nick. Today, well, first off, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing today, Roger?
Good. Anything on your mind that has percolated from our conversations that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, there was something. After we finished up the last session, I realized one of the things I hadn't really said was in my taxable brokerage account currently, I'm reinvesting all of my dividends back into new shares, and that's going to be about $9,000 this year. I would be more than willing to turn off the reinvestment function and make that part of my income if it made my retirement hopes and dreams more possible.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Before we do, though, and I didn't even do it intentionally, I started to move forward with the things that we were going to talk about today. And I stopped myself because I reminded myself it's always good, especially if you're talking to someone else in a structure like this, to stop and say, is there anything on your mind that came up? Because it's easy to just keep moving forward, and having time to step away from conversations and go back to them, yeah, I think is actually extremely important. Even with a spouse or a friend, like if you have an argument with somebody, it's good to step away, let's marinate, and then go back and readdress rather than just keep plowing forward. And a lot of times, that as a planner, it's easy not to leave the room for that. But I think in personal relationships, it's not either. So good. Let's talk about this. So in the feasibility test that we'll look at on the 3rd with you, we don't pay attention to reinvestment or not reinvestment. What happens is we don't think of it as income, right? And the reason is that the return assumptions we use for the long-term feasibility testing assume dividends and that are just naturally reinvested. If you look at an index return like the S&P 500, and let's say it returned 8% over 10 years, behind that assumption is that that dividend is getting reinvested. It's just the default. So when you're doing feasibility planning in software, it's best not to include income from the investments that you have. So we don't need to worry about it. Now, when we get to resilience and how do we map out how you're going to pay for life, then it becomes an option that we look at.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you brought that up because that's not the first time I've answered that question, and it won't be the last, no doubt. Let's talk more qualitative about risk in life. How do you view investing when it comes to risk in stocks and bonds and ups and downs? Give me your elevator speech on that.
Well, I started in investing at 25 years old. I don't know if you've heard of them, but in dividend reinvestment plans, which were an easy way for somebody with just a little bit of money to buy shares in a company. And at the time they were pretty friendly. And so I started at $25 a month as a young soldier in the Army. And of course, as I've aged, I've probably become a little more risk averse as I've gotten closer to retirement. But I also understand that the market goes up and down and that I might need to manage my retirement from a point of view of, is the market down this year? Maybe I need to do something different than if the market was up. And so that's kind of how I've been approaching my retirement time is I've leaned to be a little bit less risky. And at the same time, understanding that, I'm going to have to learn how to navigate the ups and downs of the market in retirement.
So when you say I've been learning how to get less risky, what does that mean in practical terms?
So 10 years ago, I was 100% in stocks. I didn't have anything in any fixed income, treasuries or bonds or over the last 10 years, I've slowly been moving my balances so that I'm probably 55% maybe in stocks in my retirement accounts. This is not my brokerage. In my retirement accounts, which is my Roth and my traditional IRA, TSP, and probably 5% in corporate bonds and maybe 40% in treasuries. Our retirement program allows us to buy into a specific kind of government treasury fund that comes with a better interest rate than what is available otherwise. I don't quite understand the dynamics of it, but the treasuries that we purchase through our retirement program are a little more generous in the interest rate, is what I understand. Does that help?
That helps. How did you develop that strategy? Was 45% in bonds a target? Was it a guesstimate? How did you come up with that?
It was kind of my target. I kind of feel like from my knowledge of the financial markets that I want to be more conservative in the first few years of my retirement. And then maybe once I get through the first 5 years, maybe I can start shifting a little bit back towards stocks. But I know that kind of protecting your balance as you get close to the retirement date is important. And we've had except for the big correction during COVID, we've been pretty robustly heading upwards, and that isn't sustainable forever. And I know that.
Okay, I'm going to pull on this thread just a little bit. Okay, Nick, what makes you think, or where did you learn that getting more conservative in early retirement is what you should do?
I read personal financial magazines and I follow a few writers online, and it's kind of, it feels like it's the general knowledge, and maybe that's why I was interested in doing this, is to make sure that I'm making the right decisions as I get close to retirement. But it feels like a lot of the information you find in the financial magazines and online say 40-60 or 45-55 or even a 50-50 as you head into retirement is probably not a bad idea, because bonds generally, not always, but generally move differently than stocks. And of course, they have a little bit more guarantee underneath them as opposed to stocks. So I was trying to protect my balances as I headed into retirement.
That makes total sense. And I have said that in general terms. So I have said that in general terms.
And I probably heard you said it too, but I didn't want to say that I'd heard you say that in case you didn't.
No, that's okay. I can take it. Two things on that. One is, so if that is general advice, as you are at or near retirement, it's good to slow down from a risk perspective because of sequence of return risk going forward. That is a true general statement, I would say. Did you have a filter to figure out, one, does it apply to you in your specific situation? And if so, to what degree it applies?
So I guess when you hear retirement advice, it's kind of generalized and not specific to anyone's specific situation, because it's like the drawdown scenario of 4% a year is kind of the rule that everybody says is the rule. But I know that's not necessarily a rule. It's kind of a recommendation that comes with a lot of
like a heuristic
ifs and buts.
Yeah. Like yes. Yeah. Okay. That is totally normal. But I think it is also instructive of when we get generalized heuristics or rules, many of them may not apply to us in any way. And it's important to have our own plan of record to see what does and what does not. And that's what we're going to do in building it out resilient. But I was just curious as to the logic behind it, which is all sound logic from a general standpoint. Whether it applies to you or not is separate.
Right.
I think of that with my business, because all the business advice on the industry that I'm in, I don't follow almost all of it because I'm not playing their game. I have my own specific game and structure based on my life and preferences. So I have to be careful in reading general what retirement planners should do business-wise, because it doesn't apply to me. It might actually pull me in directions that aren't applicable to me at all. So I think that's important for you, but also important for everybody else as they think about this stuff.
Right.
Okay. So we're about 45, 55 stocks to bonds.
Right.
Did you feel, because we had 2 bad years in bonds, this last 2 years were horrible years in bonds. And if you're in a bond fund, you actually lost stock-like losses in bonds. Did you feel odd doing that because the markets were so good and like you were missing out? Did you have some FOMO?
So I do have a lot of FOMO, let me tell you. One of the interesting things is that as part of my readjustment to my retirement account, it's probably been the last 8 years. I started right around 50, starting to slowly migrate more into bonds. I looked at the bond fund, the kind of corporate bond fund versus the government fund in the late 2018, 2019 time period. And they didn't seem to be doing significantly different. And I don't know why, but I bailed out of the corporate bonds completely. And it's only been in the last 2 years that I've been going back into the corporate bonds, kind of after the real collapse. I went, okay, well, maybe now I should go back in. And I don't know why I even made that decision 4 or 5 years ago to migrate out of them completely, because it was not like I had some special knowledge of what the corporate bond scenario was going to be. But I've only started to add back on corporate bonds because I'm hoping that maybe they've reached their nadir and they're going to be on their way back up. And so that's where that 5% in corporate bonds actually came in, was just in the last 2 years. Okay. I've started to reallocate to those.
So you actually dodged a bullet unintentionally by making that move. And maybe there's some intuition that you can't identify that actually drove that. It might have been more thoughtful than you realize consciously. Okay.
As far as I know, it was a complete accident, but maybe you're right.
You never know. The mind's an amazing thing. We're going to send you a RISA assessment link, which is the Retirement Income security awareness. I always forget the acronym.
Okay.
Kevin Lyles and Wade Fowler are going to roll their eyes at me. But it's an assessment that we actually license in the club for people to take. I'm coming off the holidays still, like, evidently, which is essentially good, like a personality assessment to get an idea of internally where you fall on safety first versus having lots of optionality. Because it's really important to match your withdrawal strategy and investment style to who you are. And you intuitively did that with bonds, your move. You had all the FOMO of missing out, but you moved to more safety, so you didn't have that regret of having things go down. It's important that we solve for the cycle, what sets you up for success psychologically, not just simply but the math. So we'll have you take that, and we can look at that when we meet on the 3rd of February.
Okay.
Let's switch gears a little bit. You are a single dude.
I am a single dude.
No children, but lots of nieces and nephews.
Lots of nieces and nephews.
And you're going to get old. God willing.
No.
God willing. You're going to get old, Nick. Hopefully real old.
I hope so too.
Right. So when Nick is 80 and he's done all this travel and these things, who's going to change Nick's light bulb?
That's a great question. I'm hoping to solve that as much as I can on my own. That's one of the reasons why I do maintain a long-term care plan, because I would like to be able to, as long as I'm able to manage my own life, whether that means I'm managing it with assistance from friends or somebody I'm paying, I would like to manage my life as long as I can. I think we all desire to keep our independence as long as we can. And I don't feel like I want to burden any of my nieces and nephews with that kind of responsibility. It would be my intention not to. So that's kind of
I agree
where I'm heading. Yeah.
If Nick can't change his light bulb, it's something that you can't solve for this now. You're what, 59, right? 57?
50. I just turned 57.
57. That's right. I knew that. You can't solve for this now, but it's something to be aware of, right?
Right.
Now, let's ask another question. Who are you going to have coffee with? Now, obviously, you have your social network now. Who are you going to have coffee with when you're 80?
Right. Well, my area, where I live, has a pretty robust community activities within the public sector. You know, the retirement. There's a retirement, not a retirement. Let me clarify. Like a senior center that's just maybe a mile down the road, where I could hop on the bus and go and have coffee with other gray hairs, as they say.
Well, that's interesting because you're 57 and you already have gray hair, Nick. So at least you have hair. I had a conversation the other day with someone, and they were talking about, oh, wait, was it? It might have been your cohort, Laura. But I could be wrong because I talk to so many people sometimes I get confused. Where their mother, oh, it was, and their mother sort of didn't like going to the senior center. And we explored that as to whether, because it felt like you were a senior, right? It felt there's some stigma to that. But you're already thinking that way, which is a healthy thing. It's like, I got options.
Well, and one of the advantages for me is I do live in a multi-residence building. And some of the relationships I've built since I've lived here are with people who are younger than me. Some of them are older, some of them are younger. Of course, there's no guarantee that they'll all stay here, but I figure, you know, I've always been able to interact pretty well with people 20 years older than me and people 20 years younger than me. Hopefully, I won't lose that knack as I get older, and I'll be able to continue to develop relationships, even in the people just who live right around me, that will give me. We have a dinner group that goes out once a month from my community, and I'm hoping that would continue and allow me to have some maybe some folks even who I could have come change a light bulb.
I was just thinking that. Come down the hall and change a light bulb. Well, and this is actually a really good point, though, that whether you did this intentionally or not, is you live in a micro community, an ecosystem, because of whether it's a high rise, I don't know what the structure is, whether it's a high rise or, with people that are moving in and out, there's interactions in common areas, there's this dinner club where even if the dinner club may regenerate with people that are totally different, but you play in traffic, you naturally bump into people. Right, whereas if you live in Laura's situation, the cohort who lives in a single family home and would love to stay there, your world can get very small because you don't naturally run into people to get your mail, maybe. But so you actually have set up yourself to some success there.
Right. And of course, the other issue is that, which I'm currently addressing in my own life, my mother has reached, she had a fall a month and a half ago, and she lives in a single family home, and her world had already been shrinking because of her mobility issues prior to the fall. And one of the advantages to living in a community like I live in is, like you said, I'll have natural interactions with people because they'll be in the hallways and they'll be in the common areas. Whereas when you live in a single family home and you're not able to, if your ability to navigate out of that single family home, you can still stay there, but you have limits on navigating out of it, it can really collapse your social network really fast. And that's why when I was shopping for my home, first of all, I had parents who were older and I didn't know what that situation was going to entail. So one of the reasons I looked for a single family or a single level living style was to accommodate my parents or my aunt and uncle. It would also benefit me. I've come to realize really quickly as I watch some of the older residents around me having the ramps and the elevators and the ability to walk across the hall and knock on a door and say, "Hey, Nick, can you help me out?" is really great. So I kind of made a distinct decision to stay away from a single family home because even in robust neighborhoods, as your abilities decrease, I knew that your social network could decrease pretty rapidly.
That's excellent points. Your intuition on this for you, thinking about your mom and your aunt, maybe have served you well here as well. And then you have the maintenance part of it, right? The yard, the sprinkler, the garage. And one other aspect of it that I want to pull on here was, related to, it was your aunt or your mom that had the fall?
My mom just had a fall right before Thanksgiving.
We have all these services now, like in, Whole Foods and other places. Well, anybody will deliver groceries to you, and you can order a Big Mac and have it delivered to you. Anything, which are very convenient, but they keep you in your house even more, right? You could literally live with not ever going out of your house. I have a gentleman who I haven't talked to in years, but used to work at the firm that I owned, who every Friday he volunteered for a local charity. I don't know if they have it nationwide, called Meals on Wheels. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yeah. Both my mom and my dad get meals from Meals on Wheels.
And Bill he had a Friday schedule. So every Friday afternoon, he would deliver meals, and he had his portfolio of people. So he saw the same people every week. I always admired him for that. That's a commitment. But his interaction with every person ended up becoming like a home check unintentionally. Are they okay? And, just because you walk in and you bring the food, and built some low-level relationships. And many of the people in his portfolio, he was the only person that they saw all week.
Yeah, I know that's not uncommon.
So to your point, I think these are things to think about. Now you're 57 and it's serving you now, but if you live in a single-family home now, have it on the horizon as a possibility when you're 65 or 75. It's not like you have to do it now. The earlier you do it, the more integrated you can get, which is helpful, but don't feel like you have to decide black and white right now.
Yeah, but I think people often we want to hold on to our independence and our way of living, we have a pretty strong connection to it. I don't know how or if we'll ever get my mom out of her house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she really, 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 really wants to stay there, even though it's got stairs and it's not exactly the most conducive place for a senior citizen. There's a strong desire to stay in your own space, and I realize that. And you know, it can be hard to make the move from single family home to multifamily dwelling anytime if you're used to a single family home. But I would agree with you, Roger. It's something that if you're in a single family home, you would need to keep track of how your life is changing as you get older, and hopefully make the decision before you're forced into the decision.
There's an old saying, it's never the thing, it's the thing about the thing. And I think that
Exactly.
I think that applies here. I've seen this in Shauna, my wife, where I'm not supposed to talk about on the show, but hey, she's downstairs and she's tired. I'm joking. She knows I does sort of. She sort of does. I know my boundaries. When we've looked at Colorado, and I've shared a lot of that story, you know, we were looking at building a single family home.
Right.
I was fine with not doing that, but that was her image in her mind. She likes her yard and she likes, it ended up, we bought a townhouse in town on a trail with people around us with really no yard. She absolutely loves it.
Yep.
It's just that it didn't fit the paradigm that she had in her head, right? And I think, like, now I'm not saying this specifically about your mom, but as we get older, things represent security, memories. It's much more of a psychological journey that maybe that's where some of the answer is, to help people think about this and get out of their own head or navigate it, because we don't even know why we're so convicted, like in your mom's case, of this is my place. Because you don't want to have to get to the point, I would think, Nick, of her having to resign herself and you pulling her out for her own good, right? That's not a
great scenario.
Not a great scenario. So, but it sounds like you've set some things up well. And then the last part of this is, okay, you got who's going to change the light bulb, who you're going to have coffee with, is what the heck are you going to do for passion and curiosity and hobbies? And my intuition based on our discussions is, you live in a metropolitan area that is robust in culture and museums and transportation and things like that, that it's, you sort of are playing in the playground. You're not living on a farm away from, you know, ability to do something.
Nope, you're right. I'm in a pretty robust metro area with a lot of opportunities. As a matter of fact, a friend just retired, I guess, on the 31st of December. And one of the things that she said was, I've decided that I'm going to go and spend time in a museum one day a month. And I was like, if I retire in a year, I want to be on your Wednesday list. Let's go do it together. You know, we'll get lunch and we'll go do it, you know? And so, yeah, I live in a pretty robust community. I also have I currently volunteer while I'm employed. I would like volunteering to become kind of, as we've talked about, the replacement to work. I would rather work for free because I want to, rather than work for a check because I have to. And as a veteran, I'm interested in being involved in the local veterans community. I'm also interested in, you mentioned the Meals on Wheels. We have a lot of that available in our community, where you can pick people up and take them to appointments or bring them a meal on wheel, or, you know, there's a lot of different volunteer opportunities. And I see myself probably spending parts of 3 to 4 days a week volunteering, you know, leaving my weekends and maybe a day in the middle of the week to me. And the other advantage to the volunteering is, when you want to do what I want to do, which is take a trip or go to the family cabin in the summertime, I can say, I'll be back in a month. And you're not leaving the organization you volunteer for may be a little jammed up, but you're not required to go back to work.
Ask permission.
a week after your
or
vacation.
ask permission.
Yeah, right. Or ask. That's a great way to say it. Ask permission. I'll just state it. This is what I'm doing.
Nick, I'm loving all this. I do want to pull on one thread related to your friend in the museum. If I heard correctly, she said, I'm going to go to one museum a week. I have a day. I'm going to a museum.
A month.
A month.
It was
Okay,
a monthly
month.
thing.
Okay.
She's gonna set one
Thank you.
day a month aside.
That'd be a lot of museuming. So one day a month. And my assumption in that is that this is what she's going to do. And if nobody goes with her, she's doing it.
Right.
And her telling you that story inspired you. Well, I would love to do that too. And now you have someone to go with.
Right.
And assuming she wants you to go. But but she was going to do it anyway.
She is an actress on the side, so she could have been acting like she wanted me to join her.
You don't know, right?
Right. But now you have me wondering.
Yeah, you better get caught. Do you really want to? Now you sound needy, though. We don't want to sound needy. But my point is that, and this is a female in a metropolitan area that is going to go do something, and now she's communicating it to others.
Right.
That makes her interesting. She's doing something interesting, which is which is attractive to others. And if you want to bring people, if you want to do things with people, or if you want to build a social network, job number one is to be interesting enough for people to want to be your friend.
Oh, right. Definitely.
Does that make sense?
Yep, it makes complete sense.
And
to be honest, I wasn't the only one who jumped. There was other people in the group who also said, one of them who's already retired was like, I'm going to join you starting now. I'm not going to wait for Nick to join us in a year. I'm going to do it now.
And so she's an actress, and all our actor, and all actors have some craziness in them. So she's probably interesting already, but that's separate. I guess my point is, a lot of us desire for more community, more friends.
Oh yes.
And I'm better at it than I used to be, but
it's hard.
It's hard, and we tend to wait for somebody to ask.
Right.
Let me find, they're doing, I would love, they wait for somebody to ask them to do something rather than, I'm going to the museum once a month, announcing it, and then now people get attracted to that. Because there are probably most people, if you're default, usually are waiting for someone to ask or to be given an opportunity rather than to create the opportunity. So it takes a little bravery. But in this case, my guess is with her, if she had gone to the museum by herself for 10 years, she would have still had a great time and had seen very interesting things. So we just need to be, I think from a bravery standpoint, it's important to work at being interesting, and that's going to be naturally attractive to people. And it takes a little bravery.
Exactly. Agreed.
All right, Nick. The next time we talk will be on the 3rd when we have the feasibility test. We'll look at resilience. We'll talk about the dividends and not the dividends, and we'll identify some risks and opportunities for you to take steps. We'll rationalize how much should you be safe on your investments versus not, given the totality of Nick's specific situation, not just generalized rules of thumb. And then you'll be on live. Your camera will be off. And you'll be, as we build out the story of the version 1 plan of record, you'll be able to ask questions and challenge and make tweaks to it as we go. So it'll just be like this, but we'll have some structure around it. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
Anything that you want to share or want to ask that hasn't been?
I don't think so. I think we've done a pretty thorough job of covering everything up to this point.
All right. Well, as things come up, we can address them when we chat. I want to thank you for being willing to do this, because I think it helps a lot of people that we'll never know about, which is a beautiful thing.
I agree. And I think the dynamic of a single male and a single female was inspired, actually, because I know that just when you read economically the difference between males and females, often there's a different dynamic for females when it comes to finances and retirement. And so I think it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing your conversations with, I think you said her name was Laura.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to hearing that part of the conversations.
Yeah, I am. I think I did really well with having you and Laura. You two have great spirits and wonderful stories.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to take a little baby step that you can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, go to a link that we're going to share in our 6-Shot Saturday email. That's our weekly recap of the show where we're able to share resources. If you're not signed up for that, go to 6shotsaturday.com. I'm going to share a link to a Hartford website. Hartford has partnered with the MIT Age Lab. We've had the director of the Age Lab on the show, I guess years ago. We need to have him back. Joe, I don't have his name in front of me, but he's a great guy. The reason I want you to go to this website is because Hartford has licensed a lot of the studies that the MIT Age Lab has done around aging and how to navigate that. There's a guide on buying and maintaining a car, a guide on conversations with older drivers. Maybe you're dealing with parents on this. A smart way to prevent and detect home fires, how to age-proof your home and on maintenance, a way to design kitchen. I think Nick is doing a big kitchen remodel. Well, there's design suggestions from the Age Lab and research on how do you design a kitchen and a bathroom to help you maintain your independence in your home. A lot of great resources on that website. And so we'll have a link to that in 6-Shot Saturday. Now we're on to our next installment of the missions that Zygmunt Kansler flew in a B-17 in World War II. Let me get to the page of his book. Last week was a heavy one. All right, so that really dramatic one where they were the only ship from their squadron to come back. That was on July 19th. And that was a trip that took 7 hours. Lost a lot of ship. They had a bombardier that they hope hit the Earth safely. That was on July 19th. So his next mission, number 16 and 17, was the next day, July 20th, 1944. Think about that. Ship number 183, sortie 11. Bombed an airdrome in Germany today. There was no flak, but encountered or seen 100 to 150 fighters. Hot time in the air today. P-38 done a darn good job today. Carried a load of incendiaries and done a good job. Mission was 6 hours, 50 minutes long, altitude 24,000 feet. And then as an addendum, it looks like he wrote later because it's in a different pen, one ahead of Jerry. I hope he doesn't get even again. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.